mean you press a vote?
Hello? Hello?
Wait, where is that audio coming from? Okay. All right. I will now call this meeting of the Local Agency Formation Commission to order. And if we get a roll call.
Commissioner Freeman.
Here.
Commissioner Geyer.
Here.
Commissioner Hartman. Here. Commissioner Kiriakou.
Here.
Commissioner Magana.
Here.
Commissioner Nelson.
Here.
Commissioner Osborne.
Here.
Commissioner Patino.
Here.
Commissioner Richardson. Commissioner Stark.
Here.
Commissioner Williams.
Here.
Let the record reflect that Commissioner Richardson is absent.
Thank you very much. If you now join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, the next item of business is the approval of the minutes from the February 1st, 2024 meeting.
Move approval. Second.
Motion by Hartman, second by Patino. We have remote commissioners, so we need a roll call today. Okay, can we move on to a roll call?
And Chair Freeman, we have no request to speak on this item.
Oh, thank you very much.
Commissioner Geyer.
Aye.
Commissioner Hartman.
Aye.
Commissioner Kiriakou.
Aye.
Commissioner Patino.
Aye.
Commissioner Stark.
Aye.
Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Chair Freeman.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you so much. Next item of business is administering the oath of office to our newly appointed alternate special district member, Commissioner Magana.
I, Jorge Magaña, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that I take this obligation freely without mental reservation and purpose of evasion, and that I well and faithfully will discharge the duties which I am upon them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any requests to speak from the public on this item?
Chair Freeman and members of the commission, we have no request to speak on this item.
All right. Next thing we're going to look at is a change to the agenda. So we were going to have, or there was a recommendation to have a closed session, but that has been retracted by legal counsel. And so maybe we could pull that over to.
Yes, Mr. Chair. We did an addendum to the agenda on Monday prior to the 72-hour cutoff for amending the agenda without going through a special procedure. So the closed session is not just recommended, it is now on your agenda. And since that was distributed, we've concluded that there is the threat or inference of a possible threat is basically evaporated. It's not an issue anymore. So I would request that you take a motion and a vote to drop the closed session item off your agenda.
Thank you so much. Do we need to take public comment on that?
Yes.
Do we see any public comment? Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak on this? This is give you a minute in order to think, or not a minute, but give you a few seconds to raise your hand or something, because we didn't have speaker slips ahead of time for that.
And Chair Freeman, I would just like to let everyone who is participating on Zoom know that if you would like to request to speak on any of our agenda items, to please use the raise hand feature.
You should turn in your speaker slips in general, yes, for the other public comment opportunities that were going to be occurring. This, though, is for public comment on the modification to the agenda that we are now making quickly.
We'll take it.
Not at all, no.
And Chair Freeman and members of the commission, I have no request to speak on this item.
Great, thank you so much.
I'll move withdrawal of the closed session item.
Second.
Motion by Williams, second by Hartman. Can we please take a roll call vote?
Commissioner Freeman,
Aye.
Commissioner Guyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Hartman,
Aye.
Commissioner Kiriako,
Aye.
Commissioner Patino,
Aye.
Commissioner Stark,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you so much. Moving on, now is the time for members of the public to speak on items that are not on the agenda. Are there any requests to speak on items not on the agenda?
Chair Freeman and members of the commission, we have no request to speak under general public comment.
Thank you so much. That concludes public comment. We'll now move on to the approval of the consent calendar. Are there any requests to pull items or potentially a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
Motion by Guyer, second by Stark. Is there any public comment on the consent agenda?
Chair Freeman and members of the commission, we have no request to speak on this item.
Thank you so much. Moving on to a roll call vote.
Commissioner Guyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Hartman,
Aye.
Commissioner Kiriako,
Aye.
Commissioner Patino,
Aye.
Commissioner Stark,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Chair Freeman.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. The next item is changes of organization, item number 1. Will the clerk please read that item into the record?
Chair Freeman and members of the commission, changes of organization item number 1 is to consider approval of LAFCO application file number 23-04, sphere of influence and annexation of the property located in the unincorporated area of the county at 1385 and 1405 Anderson Lane, Goleta, California, to the Goleta Sanitary District.
Thank you so much. Executive Officer.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Commissioner. This is our first change of organization item that we haven't seen in a while, but this is an interesting one that includes a sphere amendment change and annexation of 2 parcels that are in agricultural designation. This was submitted by the agent of the landowners as a petition. As we said, there are 2 5-acre parcels. They are in agricultural production for greenhouses and row crops, and have 2 independent single-family residences, one on each lot. And the purpose is to move to a public sewer system and off of the septic system. In order to annex that property, they also need to amend their sphere of influence, which is currently outside of the Goleta Sanitation District boundary, which we were last updated in 2023 when we adopted service review for water and sewer. Overview of our location of this map. Having the dark shaded area is the boundary of the district. These 2 parcels you can see at the southern end. Faint arrow pointing to those 2 small little parcels in white happen to be surrounded by the district. We'll get a close-up of that here. These are the 2 parcels here. You can see the district surrounds all the properties are in and around this property. As we indicated, the current land use is for agricultural with 2 residential homes, 1 on each lot. There will be no change to this land use, really to facilitate this change to allow a sewer connection. It will remain in county agricultural zoning. The district did prepare a plan for service that indicated they had adequate services to provide sewer service to this property. The interesting component of this is that there is a Anderson Lane extension agreement on 13 additional properties that want to extend the sewer line and connect into that sewer. All of the other properties are already within the boundaries of the district. These are the two properties that are outside. And so they wanted to join in with the rest of that group that was connecting into that sewer extension. However, because they are outside of the district's sphere of influence, we have to consider amending that sphere first before we can annex that property. We need to look at the different determinations that are made when you're amending a sphere. In this case, are there planned uses? And certainly there is. There's a plan to extend the sewer line and allow additional properties to annex into this territory. Looking at the need of that service, looking at the present capacity and adequacy of the service of the district to be able to take in these two new parcels. And so all of that was determined along with the social and economic communities of interest, and we looked at whether or not the site is within a disadvantaged unincorporated community. To determine if amending the sphere was appropriate and adequate, in which case we did make a recommendation to do so. We also noted that a CEQA exemption is applicable here for annexation of this site under a Class 19. Moving through the report, whenever you annex territory, if the property is less than 12 registered voters, you need consent of those landowners which they filed as petitioners of this application. So they waive the conducting authority proceedings. The district will also waive those proceedings, and the owners have consented to the annexation itself. So now we can proceed through the process if approved without going through that notice and hearing of protest. So the conclusion is that the district is the best service provider as they provide service to the surrounding properties as well. And amending the sphere is appropriate so that they can annex this property. I know we've had some discussions in the past about annexing agricultural properties and when it's appropriate, whether our policies align with that. So I wanted to make clear that similar in the case when we were studying the community of Carpinteria, whether to expand out the sphere out in the Carpinteria Valley area. This is another similar case where the commission has the discretion to look at whether or not amending a sphere and annexing this property aligns with orderly development and would be consistent with this property. The properties are in a more industrial agriculture kind of use. It's in an urban setting as well. It's consistent with the county's general plans to allow a public sewer system over a septic system. And so with that, we feel like it does reflect consistency with LAFCO's policies and the general plan policies of the county. There's no future development associated with this, so that it'd be pure connection to the existing residents. All existing uses that are there today will continue to operate into the future as well. And lastly, the district has indicated that they do have the capability to provide service. So with that, our recommendation is that you approve this sphere amendment and annexation. And if there are any specific questions, we're happy to answer.
Thank you so much. Are there any comments or questions from the commission? Kiriako.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just two quick questions. The first is this is an agricultural area. There are surrounding ag uses, but I believe it's also to a certain extent enveloped by some semi-rural, semi-urban uses, right? There's some housing and kind of, it's within a housing envelope. Yeah,
Commissioner Kiriako, through the chair, that is correct.
Okay.
So there's still more residential to the south and surrounding, and the intent is that the annexing this property and allowing a connection to that does not take away the viability of the agricultural production that's still going.
Okay, and I think I know the answer to this question, but I'll ask it anyway. The agricultural uses, specifically the crops that are referenced in the report and the nursery, do we have information about what types of agriculture is happening in the nursery and what kind of agriculture the crops are?
Good question. I do not have that specific level, but I'm sure representatives of the owners can probably give
I'd be curious to know because I believe it came up with the Carpinteria annexation. We talked a little bit about what the type of use was. I know it was really germane, highly germane to what we were talking about, but I am curious. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions from the commission? Moving on to public comment.
Chair Freeman and members of the commission, we have no request to speak. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm actually a neighbor up the street, and I'm kind of spearheading this for the neighborhood because all of us up Anderson Lane are on failing septic systems. We have kind of a unique groundwater situation, high clay at 3 or 4 feet deep, and so almost every one of my neighbors have told me that their systems are failing, especially last year and this year, just because we had so much rain. We also have nurseries in the area, and they water constantly, so we're in a high groundwater situation. And so I'm building a house at the south end of Anderson Lane, and I'm the one who rounded up the neighborhood and said, hey, do you want to get in together here and put in a public sewer line? Because when I went through the process with environmental health and then the soils people and the septic design people, the system was a really expensive system and kind of new and unproven, where I don't have a typical main tank out to leach lines or dry wells. It's into a secondary treatment plant and then out into some kind of drip system that takes up majority of the yard, and you can't have regular landscaping with trees and things. So my septic man said, hey, if there's anything you can do to get sewer in here, I'd recommend it. So got with my neighbors, and they all said, hey, we've been hoping that this could happen for a long time. So there are 14 of us along the lane, and these 2 parcels are not in the sanitary, they're not in LAFCO's sphere, so they're not in the sanitary district sphere. We're trying to move the lines so that those 2 parcels could join in, and they would be sharing in the cost of the ultimate 2,100 foot long public sewer line. So we've worked it out with the sanitary district. All the neighbors are waiting to see this happen. It will go forward whether or not these 2 parcels do get annexed, but I know that these 2 parcels would like to be able to hook up. One of them currently has an existing residence and an industrial building with 2 tenants. The mobile home is currently on a septic system. In high rains, I can even smell it in the runoff. The other 2 buildings and their organic farmer are on porta potties. And then the other property is all flowers. At least historically, they've always been flowers. And they have an office, and they also have a residence in the back. So
If you could begin wrapping up your comments quick.
yes, I'm just supporting this. I just wanted to give you the background because you asked about what's being grown there. We're just hoping that you can adjust the boundaries so the sanitary district, who really wants to serve this, will be able to. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a question for the gentleman, if you don't mind.
Is that something that's appropriate? Then I would love to hear that.
Thank you. I'm just curious, are the other, by my count, 12 parcels in the development, are they within the sphere
Yes.
of the Goleta Sanitary District?
Yes, the map could show you that everything up both sides of Anderson Lane are in the sphere of influence and sanitary district boundaries. Just these 2 parcels in white are not in, and they would like to be able to hook up along with the rest of us along Anderson Lane.
Thank you, that's what I want.
I still have a question. You know about the flowers, so I'm guessing that's in the nursery?
Yes, greenhouses.
Do you know what the crops are?
They had historically been flowers.
Okay.
I'm not sure their crop currently, but for decades and decades have been flowers.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Is that concluding public comment? Oh, well, moving back to the commission then. I fear we have a comment from Commissioner Nelson. Actually, maybe that's a question for the public comment from Commissioner Nelson, so don't run off if the case it is.
Yes, thank you, Chair Freeman. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, it just seems obvious that these two parcels were left out originally. Was just curious on the history there for the surrounding annexation. Why were these originally left off? Does staff know?
Commissioner Nelson, through the chair, the original annexation that kind of involved around those parcels happened in the 1960s. So I really don't know the answer to that as to why they were not included in that particular time. But it was a long time ago, and I think it's been on the radar for those folks to probably annex at some point.
Okay, that was my only curiosity. Thank you.
Stark? There.
The red, white is very, very confusing. I'm happy to make a motion to approve staff recommendation with the items listed.
I'll second.
Motion by Stark, second by Harmon. Moved on to a roll call vote.
Commissioner Guyer?
Aye.
Commissioner Hartman?
Aye.
Commissioner Carriaco?
Aye.
Commissioner Patino?
Aye.
Commissioner Stark?
Aye.
Commissioner Williams?
Aye.
Chair Freeman.
I could see people who are doing the thing and then it accidentally had the audio turned on. Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
There we go. All right. Moving on to the next item is business item number 1. Will the clerk please read that item into the record?
Chair Freeman and members of the commission, business item number 1 is continued from our January 11th, 2024 meeting. It is to consider the adoption of a sphere of influence for the Santa Rita Hills Community Services District.
Executive Officer.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. So we have returned, this was a continued item from our January meeting when we adopted our service review to take a look at the public comment and the testimony that was provided, an opportunity for staff and legal counsel to look at that material to make sure it didn't change our recommendation in any real way. And so we've had a chance to do that, and we are back for the commission to take some sort of action, one way or the other, at the discretion. So this item is afforded to the discretion to the commission to make a decision about a sphere, whether it's to expand the sphere, keep a status quo, or to adopt a zero sphere for this district. It's at the full discretion of the commission. The recommendation is to expand the sphere as indicated in the report. And that's based on a number of factors and determinations that are outlined within that service review and outlined in a number of things. And I wanted to kind of reiterate some of those in my verbal presentation. When we look at amending a sphere, as we just saw in a joint application of a sphere amendment and annexation, this is purely just a sphere amendment that was brought forward as a result of the municipal service review that was brought forward. It wasn't an application driven by any particular person or entity, which the commission has the authority to look at that when you're looking at spheres of influence. And largely, the factors and the determinations that you need to make have to deal with those present and planned land uses. Something going on that would generate a need for some future action by the commission. In this case, we are aware that an individual wants to build a roadway that connects Sweeney to the district's territory. So we're aware of that. There's an approved permit. It's going through an appeal process with the county on whether or not they're going to issue that. That's a factor that the commission needs to weigh in on. Is there some activity going on out there that would cause a reasonable decision for you to say a sphere is an appropriate adjustment to make? Is there a need for that kind of service? I think we've documented in that service review and have heard testimony that for over 30 years, there's been a need to have a road that connects out. So I think those are two determinations that are often made when you're looking at adjusting a sphere. Beyond that, we look at financial ability. Is there a mechanism in place that could cover costs for such a service if it were to happen? Is there governance in place that allows decision-making and reasonable opportunities to have the public engage happen. So obviously, we've noted that when the district was formed, they did have in place an assessment district that they could draw funds and money from. There's a governance structure that's in place that actually it's not in operation. It's defunct at this point, but there is a board that could be established. So the residents could get together. They can decide to run again for the board, either get elected or appointed through the process, all of which is outside of LAFCO's jurisdiction of authority. Once they make those types of choices, do they have something in place? So the crux of that is there's a situation in place that does allow for them to have a functioning body, to look at finances that are adequate to address the need and the service opportunity of this extension of this road. And so those are some of the factors that we want to put on this record here that allows the commission to dive into this topic, make a decision individually amongst yourselves about whether you think what is the most logical and reasonable decision to make moving forward, and it's a sole discretion of your commission to do so. The other couple of components that we looked at were accountability, whether or not if the board can get functioning again, and they operate within normal open meeting laws and other state laws that function any other governing body, social and economic communities of interest. Certainly there's some interest here within this community and some economic interest for them to be able to get a road built, be able to build a house on their property. And lastly, the disadvantaged communities concept. We looked at that as well, did the analysis, and determined that that was not applicable in this case. So with those factors kind of as the backdrop of what the commission can decide, it's now an opportunity to continue to take public testimony, hear from the public, deliberate amongst yourselves, and then ultimately weigh a vote on what do you think is the most reasonable decision here. Do we expand the sphere? Do you want to keep the sphere status quo? Do you want to adopt a zero sphere for this agency? So that'll conclude my additional comments that I wanted to make revolve around this topic, and I'm here to answer any other questions that you might have.
Thank you so much. Are there any comments or questions from the commission, starting with Kiriako?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions. One, this is a little bit different than the last recommendation, where it was specifically recommended that we adopt the sphere. Is the writing of this intentional, that we consider it, not that we actually do it explicitly, that we do it? The way I'm reading it, it's recommended that the commission consider updating the sphere, and I'm just wondering if that word was incidental or significant.
Well, as I indicated, it's at the discretion of the commission to decide to amend the sphere, leave the sphere as status quo, or to adopt a different zero sphere, which would indicate the district should be dissolved. So it's a recommendation to consider one of those decisions. Ultimately, I think my recommendation was that you adopt this amended sphere to include this study area.
Okay, I was just curious because presumably the other one was also at our discretion, but that one just point blank said, we recommend you adopt it. So thanks. Any other questions? This has been some colorful reading, and I'm just wondering how much, you alluded to this, but how much do we need to consider the ability of the agency to manage a sphere in the conveying of the sphere? Can you go, I know you alluded to this, but could you just go a little bit further, a couple more sentences on to what extent we should consider that?
Yeah, I think as I have discussed in the past, whenever the commission is making these types of decisions, each one of these factors and determinations has a different weight between each individual commissioner. Some weigh certain aspects more heavily in how they want to make a decision. And if your decision is they need to have a functioning body in order for you to feel comfortable to expand a sphere, then you can rest on that level of decision making. and it's as valid and warranted in your approach to this type of decision.
Okay.
Just as it is for somebody else to say, I understand that that's a struggle right now, but there's something in that can fix that down the road, then that's a valid approach for that individual.
And then just the last question, there were some allegations made in at least one of the letters. We have no responsibility to do any fact finding or consider any of those allegations that were contained in some of the letters, do we?
Specifically, what
Do we need to
allegations are-
pursue whether or not there had been any illegal actions taken by a member of the former of the agency?
Again, it's not something that LAFCO necessarily has to take into consideration. But again, if it is within your individual perspective, something that would weigh your decision making, you want more information about, you can certainly ask that LAFCO staff dive in a little deeper.
Okay.
But we're not required to get into that.
Okay. Yeah, it's one of those things where you can't unring the bell. I'm just trying to determine how much I should continue to listen to it echo. Thank you.
Geyer.
Well, I have several questions, so bear with me. First off, I guess a question to the executive officer. Can LAFCO include the road easement as a study area without changing the SOI?
It was a study area in the service review. So if you do not amend the sphere of influence, it does not move anything further as a study, right? So classifying it as a study area without amending the sphere of influence does no additional purpose than what was already done previously. It was a study area. At the conclusion of that, we made a recommendation.
Okay, in the resolution, in the 8th whereas, I'm having a hard time wrapping myself around, is it a function of LAFCO to facilitate long-standing agency issues? And in particular, without a board of directors requesting it.
So that commission, the whereas results to recognizing the issues that were at hand and the longstanding issue of that and the easement. That was something we felt supported the reasons for expanding the sphere of influence. If that is not an applicable, reasonable whereas for your commission, you can strike that link.
Okay. In the resolution under the resolve, and it would be the second resolve, has considered all factors required to be considered by Government Code Section 56425E and 56430. 56430, I'm not aware of any financial study. My understanding that the district itself has no funds. And one of the findings that we're supposed to make under 56430F is the financial ability of the agency to provide the service. If they're broke and they don't have a board of directors, I'm having a hard time understanding how they could provide a service.
And again, each commissioner can look at that set of information and make a determination. Within the service review, we documented that the district had some additional funds still left in their account, that they still have a property tax assessment that they could activate as part of their formation. And we viewed that as the ability to provide service if those things could get moving forward. Right.
If they had a board of directors.
If they had a board of directors.
Okay.
And they made open meeting discussions and agendized topics and started to make decisions that were appropriate and reasonable, then the conclusion is again, we're looking at a sphere of influence at this level. This sphere of influence does not give the Santa Rita Hills CSD board, if it were to even get functioning, any authority to provide the service. Doesn't give them authority to condemn property, to build a road. None of that occurs. That's a separate action. If the board could get functioning, that would be a separate action that they would be able to bring back as an application to this commission, and that you would be able to have a different decision before you regarding that. Right now, we're looking at a sphere of influence and whether or not is there a plan, is there a need, can they operate and function if they had to, and does it make a reasonable decision to amend the sphere for that purpose?
Well, what I'm seeing is a lot of if, and if. And what I mostly am uncomfortable with is making an SOI change to an agency that doesn't have a board of directors that has had any input whatsoever into this process. Thank you.
Stark.
Well, I defer to Commissioner Williams.
Williams.
Well, I would just say that I would really implore my colleagues to look at this as how can we make the situation better, right? I mean, this matter of this special district is old enough of a matter. There's plenty of things that we could hash out, but that wouldn't necessarily make the delivery of services better or to make the district more functional. And my view is what is being proposed, if it is studied, may lead to more function and better delivery of services. And that's the purpose by which we do this stuff.
Now, Stark.
Well,
Whoa.
I understand what Commissioner Williams is saying, but I'm still having a hard time. Explain to me how LAFCO as a commission should be resolving another agency's issues. I mean, I understand that it would be good. I understand the people that have stood up and wanted this. I understand the need for it, and I understand the impasse for it. But is that our function to be entering into the politics of another agency to try to resolve their issues?
We'll go to Williams, but then I would love to get to Stark after that.
Yeah, I would just say that in our findings usually is enhance something to the effect of enhancing delivery of services. And I think that a imperfect situation, making it a little bit less imperfect, is very much what we are trying to do as an agency. We don't just approve SOIs and annexations for because of neutral criteria. We do it in the subjective of whether it improves the delivery of services to a given region.
Move on to Stark for a bit.
Yeah, actually, I have 3 questions, and I'm not entirely sure whether they go to our staff or to the interested private party. The first question is, I noticed that there is a difficulty between the way that the Kargasacci interests describe what is proposed. That is, that there's a difference between the MOA easement and what is proposed in the land use permit, as opposed to several comments or questions by Lakeview owners who say what we want is to build the road according to the MOA easement. And I'd sort of like to know whether both sides are talking about the same thing. And if I think I'm correct, the real dispute here is as to the scope of the private easement that was granted as interpreted by the courts, that the location of this road is, I think, accurately described, but there's a difference as to what is conveyed. And I have the same question as Mr. Geyer, and an open mind about it is whether this private dispute is any concern of LAFCO's or not. My understanding is that the county takes a position that with respect to whatever permits it's granting, it's not particularly concerned with who is right as respect to the scope of the easement as between the private parties. And I'd like that clarified for us, either by our staff or by the parties. That's a first question.
Would you like to try to get that question answered before moving on with your other questions, or
if Mr. Prater could succinctly ask it, would go, I think, a long way toward clarifying things.
It's a long way to get there. I'll answer it in this way. The sphere boundary that we are recommending, we believe aligns succinctly with the MO easement location. The means in which how that gets built is that dispute and under appeal. That is a different matter, not for LAFCO to consider. That is the authority of the county who's issuing that permit. So our SOI, as long as it aligns with what we think is the alignment, and that seems to not be in dispute, then that's what we're issuing authority to amend that sphere. And again, that amendment of that sphere is not giving them the authority to build a road. That's not what a sphere does. It basically is a planning tool that suggests there's a road that's going to get built, and where's that road going to get built? Within this alignment. Okay, others will decide whether or not the appropriateness of the actual function of that road, its parameters within that easement road being defined. And if the district were to ever take on responsibility of that road, there'd be a new application that would be brought before this commission, right? But once the road's built, if the individual property owner that's submitted to build that road wants to build that road, that's their road. Transfer of that responsibility to the district doesn't happen automatically. They have to apply to LAFCO to be able to serve outside of their district, amend the formation rules of conditions that were applicable to them. And that's a whole separate hearing and discussion. So we're not talking about the road physically, we're talking about a planning boundary onto whether or not a sphere should be applied appropriately.
You may or may not have answered my third question, which is what is the practical effect of whether this is within what would seem to generally be an aspirational planning boundary for the span of influence. Is there any real world difference if we approve the sphere expansion, or if we say we'd like to consider the sphere expansion in connection with an annexation petition like we did with the last thing we approved?
I think the real world experience that you will hopefully see out of this speaks to Commissioner Williams' comment, which is we're moving in a positive direction to see services being provided by an agency that already exists out in the area. The hope is that this will encourage landowners to or residents of the district to run for office, to fill a seat, to operate as a functioning board, and start to take the steps that are necessary for them to move forward with the intent of why they were formed in the first place.
I have one follow-up question. Is there any reason to believe that approving the expansion of the sphere of influence will make it more likely than not that the Lakeview Terrace, I think it's a terrace, Lakeview homeowners will be able to reach an agreement with the Kargasaki interests?
I would defer that comment to the landowners, right? They have to, public testimony will tell you whether or not this will encourage them to do any of this or none of it, right? They'll tell you whether or not they have an interest in seeing it move forward and do something. And you'll take that as part of the testimony and make a decision about whether they're believable or not.
I've been personally dealing with this case for over 20 years. I remember that an interminable hearing before the Board of Supervisors in which the county almost begged the parties to reach an agreement with this private dispute, and lo and behold, we're still up here urging the two groups of landowners to come together and get an appropriate road built. And to the extent that there's any progress in this area or likelihood of success in this area, I'd like to hear about it.
Right. Thank you so much. A question that I have is, so in multiple of the public comments that have been provided from the side of the Karisakis was a statement that this district, by the terms of its formation, cannot actually do this, and we disagree. As LAFCO, disagree with that analysis. Is that, which is why we're having this discussion? Am I correct in assuming that?
We do not disagree with that statement.
Okay.
In the sense that when the district was formed, it had a condition that they not have eminent domain power, and that it not provide service outside of its district. So its actual service boundary. This alignment, this sphere amendment, is outside of its service boundary. It's a sphere, a planning tool. It's a precursor to a possible annexation or out-of-agency service agreement. That future action that would come before the commission would look at the circumstances and decide if amending the formation rules and granting permission to provide services outside of its district is appropriate. So as of right now today, I would not disagree with that statement. They do not have the authority to do that. Amending the sphere does not grant them the authority to do that.
But a potential later annex would grant them the authority.
It's an indicator that they should be a service provider should the need arise. Right.
Okay.
I have one more
Guys.
question. Okay, while we're dealing with if, okay, if the SOI was granted, and down the road the parties came together, and the agency itself decided they wanted to annex that property, would the owner of that property have protest rights?
The area that's in question is an easement. And so the owners of the easement would have the right to apply for annexation of that property or out of agency service agreement. And those owners would have a right to that formal process. And if it's an annexation, a protest process would be applicable. We did not get 100% consent.
So, Bill, you want to say something?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Geyer, that's basically an unusual issue. I've seen a lot of annexations, and of course, landowner consent is usually part of an annexation proposal. The question is, in this case, who is the landowner? Is it the underlying fee, or is it the owner of the easement itself? Now, I think there's a case certainly to be made that the landowner, for purposes of that annexation, would be the holder of the easement, because they own all the rights to construct and maintain the road. However, in the future, your legal counsel might want to dig into that deeper and see where exactly that goes. But the county basically approaches the land use permit that way, which is when it comes to someone applying for a permit to build the road, the county looks to whether the person applying is the landowner, is the holder of the easement. They do not require the applicant to get consent from the underlying fee owner, but rather just the person who holds the easement. And once they determine that, then the county concludes that is sufficient. I think by analogy that LAFCO's situation may be the same, but it deserves a harder look, but I think it's certainly a reasonable position.
Well, that's part of where I'm wrestling with, is that if the MOA has expired, the easement has expired, then the landowner would be the one that would have a protest right.
I'm not aware of the MOA expiring, Mr. Geyer, but I'm sorry, this is a tough angle for me. I'm not aware that the MOA has expired, Mr. Geyer. I don't think that's true.
Okay.
It's actually related to a question that I have with relation to these same public comments. They're stating that without a district, under the terms of the MOA, the road could get built. And I was wondering, we might not have an analysis on that, but do we believe that to be true?
Well, a lot of these allegations are, a dispute between private landowners. And so, there is the MOA. It allows for the building of the road. In certain circumstances with some changes, the district might be able to step into that role. But what happens under the MOA, I think that's right now before the county in terms of an application for a permit to build the MOA road. So there's objections by the Kargasachis as the subservient tenement, and that's for the county to determine. I know, I've talked to county council about this, and their position has been that they don't try to resolve the dispute of private landowners. They look at the basic issues of, does the applicant have the easement sufficient to build the road? And if they do, they consider that to be landowner consent, then they put them through the regular permit process. And that's where they're at right now.
Thank you. The reason why I have that question, I'm going to say this because I think I'm interested to see if any of the comment might end up clarifying my thought processes on this. But the reason why I'm interested in that particular question is from the perspective of LAFCO as an agency that's trying to make it so that there's both a logical and an effective and an efficient rollout of services to an area. One of the things that I feel that is before us is to try to determine whether or not it would be more effective to use a community service district to do this, or to use an existing mechanism through the county in order to perform the same action. Almost the thought process in my mind isn't necessarily between a sphere of influence increase or not, but it's between a sphere of influence increase or zero sphering the agency in order to try to light a fire under this process to make the road actually happen. And if it's possible for the road to happen without the district, I almost am wondering if that would actually make a road happen faster than us spending an additional decade arguing about this thought process. But that's why that's the reasoning in my mind, is and why I ask that question, and why I suddenly end up caring deeply about what in some sense feels like out of the scope of what we're analyzing, but it's actually, I think, determines what feels like a way to get the road. Because if we're trying to figure out how to get the road, how do we get the road? So that's where I'm coming from on that thought process there. But I don't know if there's any other, Geyer.
Okay, what I was a little confused about is, I guess in the staff report, second to the last paragraph, it says a county permit expired in 2013. My assumption was that the MOA expired with it. No? Okay.
Yes, to clarify, there was a permit to build the road at that time. That permit expired. The easement and the MOA road did not expire.
Thank you. Is there any other comments or questions from the commission before we move to public comment? Seeing none, and just to check, I've got it on Zoom here, but you might have a better paying attention to it.
Chair Freeman and members of the commission, we do have 5 requests to speak in our Santa Barbara hearing room. And I would like to remind anyone who is on Zoom, if you would like to speak on this item, to please use the raise hand feature. And when it is your turn to speak, your name will be called. We will begin in Santa Barbara with Marty New, to be followed by Patrick Morris.
And question, do we have the clock working today? Or should I be tracking it on my watch?
We do not have a clock,
we do not have the clock
but we will be, you and I will be tracking together.
Okay. Thank you.
I promise to be brief. I have to agree with Doss. Better. Less perfect, less imperfect is really good enough. And the if is a very powerful word, Mr. Geyer. If you do your part, we will work very hard to do ours. I happen to know because I have been a board member, and we still have 2 board members who want to serve. And if this road gets built, there are 3 other people who are considering being on the board, and I think that's for real. The benefits of this road are extremely important and serious, not just for the landowners, the people who work for us, but also the whole county, the fire department. Do you know how many chop shop trips have to be made with vehicles in the county who put themselves at risk because the roads are not safe? It's only getting more so. I know that all of you, especially our colleagues from Lompoc, understand how important it is that progress is made. This is an area of great beauty, and it's a powerful AVA, viticulture area to make wine. I'm a farmer, I make wine. It is important that it's supported because it helps the whole region. And they know that, and we all know that. Santa Barbara is on the map internationally because of our area. It's important we have these safe roads and that you support us in that. And I really highly recommend that you adopt LAFCO's proposition and give us one step forward. And we'll take over, I promise you. Thank you. A little bit shorter, right?
Thank you very much.
We will now go to Patrick Morris, to be followed by Adam Tolmec.
Good afternoon, Chair Freeman, Commission. May I first ask Chair Freeman, a number of questions were asked by the Commission during the Commission comment period. I'd like to address some of those, but I can't do that in the constraints of 3 minutes. I would ask for an additional 2 minutes of time to address initially some of the questions that were asked and then my remarks that I intended to make.
Yeah, I will consider that to be a meta question and not docket from your time. But I don't believe that unless we actually direct you to provide an answer that we would do that in such a way. So if any of the commissioners would like to direct to provide more time in that way.
I think we could, after his comments, we could ask one of the questions directly.
I'd like to from our attorney too.
Yeah, it's a good call. Yeah. Stark, was it? Are you trying to? No. Okay. Okay, great. Okay, so I'm gonna just give you 3 minutes initially, and then we might call you back in a bit.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. I am going to address some of those issues, but first I have some news that I think will help this body. I had a very productive conversation on the phone this morning with Randall Fox, who's the attorney for Mr. Blanco, about his pending LUP, which is under appeal. And we have agreed to arrange a meeting between our respective clients to discuss how we might be able to bring the LUP into conformity with the MOA, which it does not presently conform, but only in certain areas. And I was also pleased, as were my clients, to see how many people from Lakeview took a position that they want to build the MOA road. Because that is what the Kargasakis want to do, is build the MOA road. That is what the courts want everyone to do, is build the MOA road. But the MOA road is not just a location. It is an easement, a bundle of rights and responsibilities that the parties did, in fact, Commissioner Stark, agree to back when the county did all this in 1989. There is an agreement. It's been outstanding since 1989, and it has not expired. And that agreement, I think we are finally coming closer and closer to implementing that agreement with the help of the court system, which basically said, going forward, access to Lakeview is going to come by building the MOA road as prescribed in the MOA. And so Mr. Fox and I are going to get our clients together, presumably in a Zoom meeting, to go over the only 4 or 5, they're relatively significant, but the 4 or 5 differences that they have about the implementing of the MOA. And that would meet the requirements of so many of the people who have now come forward. Almost half the landowners, if you include my clients, now say, we want to implement the MOA. That is the first time in the 14 years I've been working on this that that's actually happened. So implementing the MOA, perhaps because of the impetus of the court saying this is your way, but the bottom line is that amending the sphere of influence does nothing. This is a non-functioning organization that did not, in fact, deliver any of the services it was already supposed to deliver when it was active. So why would we be expanding it when it's inactive and unable to go? There are many private road access associations throughout Santa Barbara County. Rancho Ladera comes to mind. That's homeowner and landowner operated. And so those opportunities arise for this organization without LAFCO expanding a sphere of influence, which it is correct. The resolution of formation 03-13 prohibits this from being done. And so I would say to all of you, zero sphere is what this CSD needs. And let's go forward with building the MOA road by consensus between the parties. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Nothing?
We will now go to Adam Tolmack, to be followed by Angelo Salvucci.
Hello, board. My name is Adam Tolmack, and I'm a landowner of parcel number 45 in the Lakeview subdivision, and I started out by going out Sweeney Canyon Road past, it ends, and then there's this dirt road through a vegetable field, and then out there at parcel number 45, there's a small vineyard called Fasega. And so in 2003, I started buying grapes from that vineyard. And then time passed, and the owner, Hank Klenn, somehow decided that I should carry on the legacy. He's a few years older than I am. And so I ended up purchasing that in 2020. And so I'm fairly familiar with it. And, the road's horrible, the current access. And it seems really unsafe. And, for safety reasons, fire and stuff. Yeah, sometimes it's almost impassable. But so I'm very much in favor of extending the sphere of influence in hopes that allows us to build a road at some time. Thank you.
We will now go to Angelo Salvucci, to be followed by Randall Fox.
Good afternoon. My late wife and I purchased our 2 parcels in Lakeview 22 years ago, and at that point there'd been decades of discussion about the access road. We didn't anticipate that it'd be decades later that we're very little closer to resolution. Previous comments that you've had, public comments, have spoken about alternative methods of financing and maintaining this road, one being a homeowners or parcel owners association. We tried that 20 years ago. I was the president of the association, but the opposition family that you've already heard about declined to join because of that. The remaining parcel owners were reluctant to pay more than their fair share for the road, and so that organization dissolved. I'd also like to address the issue of the non-functioning community services district, and the reason for that is because we realized as we began deliberating that whatever we did was going to be dependent on the access road, and we had no authority to affect the access road. So we could spin our wheels forever and have no effect. We could build out a gold-plated internal road system, but we still wouldn't be able to get to that, except perhaps by helicopter. So we desperately need this access road. I'll go Commissioner Williams' comment. This is a small but significant step in making things better for all of us. And one last thing, it's a substantial majority of the parcel owners that have, at least for the 20 years I've been there, interested in building this road according to the MOA requirements. And it's not a recent majority. It's been a majority for it probably longer than my 20 years, but certainly during my 20 years. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I just want to let you know that I have full confidence in my alternate. I will have to leave the further discussions, but I have, like some of my colleagues, I've been involved in this long enough to want to see an improvement, and I do see this as a path worth voting for today.
Thank you so much.
We will now go to Randall Fox, to be followed by Mark Horvath on Zoom.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of LAFCO. Appreciate the opportunity to address the issue. This county service district was formed in the 1960s. It was called Lakeview Estates because it was going to have a bridge across the San Ynez River to attach it to Santa Rita Road. That obviously didn't happen, and it won't ever happen. And so you've got a district of 39 parcels that are essentially landlocked from any public road. Expanding the service sphere of influence will allow the district to consider whether they want to help fund this road and get it done. Individual landowners have tried. They tried to form an association, as you heard from Dr. Salvucci, that did not work. Expanding the sphere of influence is an important step in allowing these 39 landowners to cooperate and get themselves hooked up to a public road, the end of Sweeney Road. So I urge you to support the staff recommendation and include this in the sphere of influence. I think that it is useful because it's a change from the status quo, which got us nowhere, and we now will be able to take the path of moving toward actually building a road there, an all-weather surface that'll be available not just for the landowners out there, but also for fire, public safety officials, anyone else who would use the process. So we need a road. LAFCO is formed to help provide services in a logical way for people, and this is a step forward in making it happen. Thank you very much.
I have a question for Mr. Fox.
I would note that Mr. Fox
I'm sorry. I would note that either Mr. Fox has gotten better looking over the last 30 years since I've seen him, or my eyesight has deteriorated to an alarming degree.
I think it's your eyesight.
Yeah. I would simply ask him, assuming it's accurate what Mr. Morris said about your being in discussions with his clients to resolve the thing, would I infer from the fact that you're advocating the approval of the expansion of the SOI that you don't see the SOI approval as being an impediment to those negotiations, or am I wrong?
No, I think it'll be a facilitator for the negotiations because it will provide a mechanism that could actually build the road. That all the 39 landowners who will use this road, if the district decides to participate and decides to build it, would be the appropriate entity to do that.
So I would gather if we approved it, you would continue negotiating with Mr. Kargasaki.
Of course. Like I'm the one who called him this morning and said, hey, what do we need to do to move this forward?
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Somebody's got a cell phone up here.
We will now go to Mark Horvath on Zoom, to be followed by Hank Blanco, who is our final speaker.
Good afternoon. Thanks very much for meeting here today. I just wanted to verbalize my support as well as a parcel owner there in Lakeview for expanding the sphere of influence to help build the MOA road. I've been involved in one way or another in this process for 25 years now that I've owned our parcel there. And we've been working, it seems, the entire time on and off on getting this resolved. I agree that the road in its current state is quite dangerous, sometimes impassable. And it seems like what is necessary is that extension of Sweeney Canyon Road to hook up to Lakeview. As Angelo said, we could do whatever we want with the interior roads, and it would be meaningless until we have that access to Lakeview. So thank you. I just wanted to verbalize my support of expanding the SOI.
And we will now go to Hank Blanco on Zoom, who is our final speaker.
Okay, Commissioner Freeman, commissioners, or Chair Freeman, forgive me. Thank you for this opportunity. In 1990, there was an agreement that was made between 39 parcel owners and the servient tenement owner of the land upon which we 39 parcel owners have an easement and a right to build a road. In that document, the MOA document, which most of you have been copied, there are 4 places where it says that, and paragraph 18 specifically is a very short paragraph that says that upon recordation of the easement by all 39 parcel owners, they will immediately create an assessment district to build the MOA road. Where all of that fell short was that there was no sunset date, or there was no other conditions upon which we could have had this problem resolved 34 years ago. I have worked tirelessly through our great attorneys over at Chicago Title and other. The Wallace Group did a great job for many years defining what would happen once we get the MOA road built. The passage of this SOI is critical for all 39 parcel owners to have a much more safe and public road with no interference of any kind by anybody else. So I'll keep my comments very short to that point, and I want to commend Mr. Attorney Bill Dillon and Mike Prather, Executive Officer, for the great recommendation to get us to this threshold for where we can all move forward. Thank you very much.
Chair Freeman and members of the commission, we have no additional requests to speak.
Thank you so much. Moving back to the commission, are there any comments on this? Seeing Geyer.
If there was a motion made, could we strike the 8th whereas from the resolution, and in the be it resolved number 2, strike out 56-430? And my reason for that is that the 8th whereas, I'm really not convinced that it's LAFCO's position to be facilitating or helping with agency's long-standing issues.
By the 8th whereas, do you mean the one that reads, whereas the commission recognizes that for years the access road has been a source of contention, that one? Or do you mean?
Yeah, it says the 8th whereas is including the road easement area within the district's sphere of influence as a study area may help facilitate it.
Okay, I counted that as the 9th. That's why I wasn't certain, because they're just, yeah. Okay, good.
And then my reason for striking 56-430 is, that comes under, we shall prepare a written statement of its determinations with respect to each of the following. And I don't believe that we've been given a financial study of the ability of the agency. So if we just, I'd feel I could support the resolution if those 2 things are taken out.
Stark.
More than one moving part, which renders it immediately suspect. I hate to slightly disagree with my colleague, Mr. Geyer, but I would suggest that if we do exercise our discretion and adopt the sphere of influence agreement, one reason for doing so would be precisely that it would encourage the parties to be in a position to resolve the dispute, which I don't think it's unnecessarily overstepping our bounds to attempt to get, we legitimately think that there's a reasonable chance that putting the community service district in a position to do something would facilitate an actual agreement between the private parties, even though we really don't have any jurisdiction to resolve disputes between private parties. I think in this case there might be a legitimate interest in doing that. I'm not fully convinced that we wouldn't be just as well off sort of denying this without prejudice to their reaching an agreement. But in context, I don't think there's much difference between doing that and approving the sphere, with the understanding we can always change it back. If I understand correctly, it's a aspirational planning tool, and if our aspirations change, we can adjust the sphere accordingly when the time comes to adopt annexation petitions, which would indeed change the boundaries of the district.
Could I make a comment back to that?
Yeah.
Okay. I somewhat agree with Commissioner Stark, but what I'm concerned with is setting a precedence of LAFCO stepping into an agency's issues. I don't believe that that's our position to do that. Once an agency is formed, they take care of their issues. And I'm afraid that if that whereas is left in there, it sets a precedence for us to continue to do that.
Before we go back to Stark, I want to check, is Commissioner Nelson, is your comment on this same topic, or is it, okay, then Nelson, if you'd like to interject something here.
Yeah, I have a question for maybe staff or council. If we strike 56-430, that's basically a finding that we have to make, the way I read that, to make the action. So does that call into the action, whether the action would be legally executed at that point? Because that's my concern. If it doesn't mean anything, then it doesn't cost us anything. Whereas doesn't cost us anything on the actual action. So I'm indifferent on the whereas, but I'm concerned about striking a finding that we might have to make and what that might do to the legal process.
Commissioner Nelson, good question. Mr. Prater and I were discussing that issue on a sidebar, and the answer is no. 56-430 is not a required finding for an SOI amendment. The required findings for an SOI amendment are in section 56-425E 1 through, looks like 1 through 5. So that is still properly referred to in the resolution, draft resolution. So if you did strike the reference to 56-430, that would not make the document legally inadequate for a SOI amendment.
Okay, that's very helpful. And I appreciate Commissioner Geyer's concern about its precedent setting. What I do think this may be unique is, maybe we should get involved when there's been 34 years of conflict, and maybe that would be the precedent. So, and there's probably not going to be a lot of other projects come to us with that long of a history, and maybe we just say, hey, we only step in after 30 years or 25, but this has been way too long. And I have some other comments eventually when we deliberate.
We'll come back to you then on those other comments. Moving back to Commissioner Stark, and while you're talking, I'm curious about your opinions on splitting the two recommendations from Geyer. So.
I'm convinced by Mr. Geyer and by Council's explanation that this is not a mandatory finding, that we could drop the reference to 56-430, was it? That we could drop to that without sacrificing anything. That's my comment as to that.
As for the whereas clause, then back to
yes, that was the whereas clause. No, the finding.
Yeah, there's in the therefore there's a finding about 66-430, and then separately we were discussing the whereas clause and the purpose of the sphere of influence modification.
My opinion is it's not determinative. I'd rather see it in than out, but I could live without it. I don't view this as precedent setting because this case is really unique. I don't know of any other cases in the county that have persisted for quite this long, this intractably, and involved purely private actors, as opposed to government agencies. This is a truly, I think, a one, hopefully not more than once in a generation struggle.
Thank you so much for what it's worth. And I think I'm on the same page currently about striking the 66-430, and then I would maybe prefer the whereas clause being in there, but I'm also happy without it if that gets us more votes on this. Kyriako is here.
Thank you. I can live with starting to pull at threads. I guess I get a little bit nervous if we start pulling too many threads and their connection to other threads. I agree that trying to get these individual landowners and the party here to get along is perhaps not our mission, but I also think that it's sort of a positive byproduct of us doing our job. The whole point of having orderly boundaries and putting the right things in the right places is to put people in a position where they can come to these kinds of resolutions. That's the byproduct of having an orderly boundary and having an orderly sphere. So my preference would be to keep them in. I won't vote against a motion that removes them.
To verify my understanding of the two separate splitting issues, the discussion we were just having about the leaving the whereas in order to provide the motivation for performing the sphere of influence, to me, and maybe I misunderstood, seems separate from the discussion about removing 56-430. 56-430, and I might have this wrong, is about our determination that we've analyzed that the district would actually be capable of and functioning and able to do this. And I think the argument here is that we're not really sure yet. And so removing 56-430 is more removing the determination of our analysis there, but then separately the removing the whereas clause was about whether or not we wanted to get involved in the issue. And maybe we want to get involved in the issue, but not say we know it'll work.
I hear that. I guess I'm expressing an interest in preserving the recommended action as written, as opposed to starting to pull on threads.
Thank you so much for that clarification. Is there, hey, let's go back to Guy, yeah.
Well, I think as far as the eighth whereas, I could probably go either way with that, but I think it's duplicative in the sense that if the resolution is adopted, all you're doing is restating what the eighth whereas says. So it's redundant as far as I'm concerned, but the 56.
Yes, Beth Stark.
Yeah. I might suggest that we're in better grounds removing the 56-430 thread and leaving the comment about facilitating resolution of the dispute largely unchanged. I'm a little bit concerned, and we have to. I recognize we have very broad discretion in a legislative matter, particularly this, but we need to have a record that reflects some stated reason for taking this action, and I prefer that it be fuller rather than skinnier.
Thank you so much. That makes sense to me. Go back to Geyer.
Okay. I can respect that, but I think that the broad discretion is prior to the formation. After the formation of a district, it becomes narrower. But I'll yield to that, to leave that.
Yeah. So I remember the Commissioner Nelson had some other comments that he wanted to put in place.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're in deliberations now. I guess we don't have a motion yet. I guess the comment that I will have is that Mr. Morris says that an expansion will do nothing. If that's the case, why does he care whether we move forward or not? Why does he oppose the action if it does nothing? There's a reason that this hasn't moved forward. It's because someone or multiple parties have not acted in good faith over the years. I'm very interested in the experiment of seeing if this moves things forward. If this doesn't, I'm very interested as a county supervisor to be working with the supervisor that represents that area to use other additional county powers to help facilitate this, because this has gone on for far too long. You know, the county in its wisdom did the parcel split 39 units some time ago, and for it to persist without a ongoing legal access for this long is something that I don't think is that we'd ever want in good government. You know, I'm tired of finger pointing. I really want to get to solutions. I think this action, as well as my comments here today, that if this doesn't solve the problem, then I'm really interested in the county engaging, might signal to the parties to figure this thing out. This needs to be resolved so that we can put this in the rearview mirror. I know personally I've been dealing with this issue for going on 12 years, and I'm fairly new to the process, it sounds like, compared to others. So I'm really motivated to seeing this move forward, and I'm willing to make this experiment work.
Thank you, Commissioner Nelson. Are there any other comments from commissioners here? Looks like maybe Hartman.
I'm prepared to move staff recommendation as is. I realize that it's a little out of our normal, but I agree with my colleagues that something is better than nothing. This has been a catch-22, and it's been it reflects very poorly on all of us that we can't resolve this. And so anything that we can do from where we sit to make it a little bit better, and in hopes and strong encouragement to the parties to resolve it, I think we have to do. So I would move staff recommendation.
I'll second the motion.
Because Kiriako had been kind of fighting for the staff recommendation as earlier, I will give him the second on that, and I also did hear him first. So first,
I'll
motion by
defer to the
Hartman,
vice
second
chair.
by
She can have the second.
Good
okay.
move. Good move.
All right. First by Hartman, second by Patino.
Can question real quick?
Yes. Yeah. So we comments on the, because I know there's going to be maybe some contention on this, because we currently have, I think at least 3 commissioners who've been expressing interest in something, in a motion that was different than this. So Nelson, you have any comments on this motion?
Yeah, I just want to clarification on the motion, whether it included 56-430 or not, because and just for the record, I'll approve either one. I just wanted a clarification.
I moved it as staff recommendation is, and if that doesn't fly, then we'll go back and amend it.
This looks like maybe Geyer.
I would support the motion if you'd strike 56-430.
Same.
All right, I would accept that friendly amendment. Then we need another second.
I will accept that.
Okay. And is that the process we have for adjusting a motion? Great. Perfect. All right. With the new amended motion, is there any comments, remaining comments from the commission? Seeing none, moving to roll call vote.
Commissioner Geyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Hartman,
Aye.
Commissioner Kiriako,
Aye.
Commissioner Patino,
Aye.
Commissioner Stark,
Aye.
Commissioner Nelson,
Enthusiastic aye.
Chair Freeman.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Finally, moving on. Next item is information item number 1. Will the clerk please read that item into the record?
Chair Freeman and members of the commission, information item number 1 is an update from the 2024 LAFCO staff workshop and January quarterly newsletter.
Executive Officer.
Okay, commissioners, I wish I could report that this is a vacation for me, but it isn't. This is the LAFCO staff workshop. It is from April 24th to 26th in Pleasanton, California. We are in early registration until March 10th, in which we'll get the discounted rate if we can get ourselves registered. We anticipate sending 3 staff members to this event. The quarterly report is attached. As part of this report, it basically gives you the latest and greatest about the activities going on at LAFCO. And lastly, I wanted to note that the order form for the new Cortese-Hertzberg Act guides for 2023 are out, and we have submitted our order as usual for 3 paper copies to be able to distribute to those members that receive paper copies. Otherwise, the guide is also available on the LAFCO website. And if you can't find that, reach out to our office and we will be able to provide a PDF link to the guide. So with that, that concludes our informational item 1.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the Commission? Seeing none, are there any public comment on this item?
Chair Freeman and members of the Commission, we have no request to speak on this item.
Thank you so much. Moving on, the next item is information item number 2. Will the clerk please read that item into the record?
Information item number 2 is to receive and file a report on independent special district commissioner election results.
Executive Officer.
You Chair, this is to announce the election results for the special district election ballot that went out. Attached is the summary of the results and the individual membership that participated and voted. I do want to note that based on my research of looking back at the different elections, that this was a record year. So we got 31 votes in our districts, which is a high bar for them to stand. So I expect another 31 votes whenever we send out these elections to well attended through this process. As you know, prior it was hold a quorum, you can never meet the quorum. Then you go out and say, okay, we'll do a ballot version, and we kind of do. Under that, prior, we also sent out a ballot that basically said, we're just going to go straight to the mail ballot. So this year was that first year of going straight to the mail ballot, and we had a fairly good turnout. So we appreciate that. And that are the results. The results was that we have a returning Commissioner Geyer, and we have a new alternate Commissioner Magna, and he's received his oath, and so we've got a full commission to attend our future meetings. So with that, if there are any questions, I'll happy to answer.
Okay. Any questions, comments from the Commission? Seeing none, is there any public comment on this item?
Chair Freeman and members of the Commission, we have no request to speak on this item.
All right, moving on to information item number 3. Will the clerk please read this item into the record?
Chair Freeman and members of the Commission, information item number 3 is a proclamation to honor William Dillon, Local Agency Formation Commission Legal Counsel.
Mr. Prater.
Okay, I'm going to turn this back over to you, Chair. If you would so kindly read the proclamation, award that to Dillon, and obviously take any comments from the commissioners that would be appropriate.
The Local Agency Formation Commission in the County of Santa Barbara, State of California. A proclamation of the Santa Barbara Local Agency Formation Commission honoring Mr. William Dillon for his dedication, hard work, cheerful spirit, and many contributions. Whereas Mr. Dillon started as legal counsel for the Local Agency Formation Commission of Santa Barbara County on March 2nd, 2006, and is retiring on March 8th, 2024. Whereas Dillon attended over 200 LAFCO meetings, prepared legal briefs, closed sessions, read all of the incredibly interesting staff reports, maintained a professionally calm demeanor throughout it all, and has been a great team player. Whereas Dillon acted as interim executive officer and led the recruitment and hiring of Mike Prater as LAFCO's first employed executive officer. Whereas Dillon has shown great perseverance and much patience working with 3 different executive officers and numerous commissioners during his tenure. Whereas, throughout his many years of service, Dillon has served the people of this county with wisdom, compassion, and professionalism. Whereas, his good humor, energy, and grace has enriched those fortunate enough to know and work with him. Whereas, he has earned the respect and admiration of the Commission and co-workers for his knowledge, efficiency, and gracious manner, and he will be missed by all. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that, in acknowledgement of his exemplary service and many contributions, Santa Barbara LAFCO sincerely thanks William Dillon for his dedicated service and congratulations on his well-earned retirement, and our best wishes to him for continued success, happiness, and good health in the years to come.
Mr. Chair, just a quick comment, very short. This is almost my third retirement because I retired out of county council, and then they brought me back as extra help employee, and then I retired out of that after a couple of years, and then I ended up with LAFCO. And this is the first time anybody ever got me with a resolution. I've been dodging these things for as long as possible. But very, very nicely stated, and I appreciate the thoughts and the, pat on the back. So thank you very much. It's been a lot of fun working with LAFCO these many years. Thank you.
And May, if anyone else tries to pull you out of retirements for something as amazing as saving the world. Comments from the commission. We'll begin with Geyer.
Well, I'd really like to thank Bill for putting up with me. I've had a lot of questions over the years, and you've been very patient with me, and I really appreciate that.
Hartman?
Well, I go back when you were with county council, and I was on the planning commission, and you've always been a font of information. And again, I agree with Commissioner Geyer. All our outside questions that must be interrupting your flow of work, and you're always eager and then willing to do more research if you weren't quite sure. You always had to nail it down. But from LAFCO's perspective, you've really seen this organization go from sort of part-time, not a full mature organization unto itself, and you've helped us make that transition. And I think that's a really major contribution, because this is a very critical, if not well understood, organization. So thank you for all of that, and just for being such a wonderful human being.
Bettina.
Thank you. I can't remember how far we go back, but I just want to say you're always steady. You always have the answer, and I like Cliff Note versions of things myself, but you're always easy to understand, and to me that is a real talent in an attorney. So thank you.
I wanted to say that it's been a pleasure working with you, and it's been something that has been very meaningful to me, having all these friendly faces on this commission as I've kind of joined it, and being able to oftentimes during the meeting end up kind of lobbying questions around, like, is this appropriate? Is that what we're doing? Is that what we're doing? And so I feel like you're not just tolerating external questions, but tolerating the on-the-fly continual beratement of our barrage of like random musings, almost, I will sometimes say, for my mind about legal issues has been really comforting. And particularly now that I've been doing the chair this year, thank you so much. So, and it's been also very fun being able to go to. I've had the pleasure of going to multiple conferences now with Mr. Dillon, and it's always been very fun. So, any final comments from the commission?
I just want to say thank you. I haven't spent I don't have quite the same tenure with you that some of the other commissioners have. I spent a little bit of time as an alternate, and I think this is my second commission meeting as a regular member. But thank you for your service. Thank you to your your larger record of service, not just to LAFCO, but to the citizens of Santa Barbara County. Thank you so much.
Mr. Stark.
Bill a little bit longer. I've known Bill for 35 years, roughly my count. We worked together when I first came to work for the county. Bill was already there as, I believe, what they call an energy attorney, which they told people who worked on the oil projects. He's an excellent lawyer. Won the California Lawyer of the Year award, which is pretty good feat for a county council. Well done. He is certainly well respected in a variety of difficult specialty areas. I think one of the agencies, not sure which, they tried to give him a resolution on his retirement, but it failed. There was a dispute. I'm not sure the nature of
it. Had something to do with one of the whereas clauses.
It was a whereas battle, north and south. It never got resolved. In any event, yeah, Bill's been a good human being, an excellent lawyer, a good friend of LAFCO, and a good friend of mine. I certainly wish him the best on a well-deserved retirement.
Is this one really for real?
All right, is there any public comment on this action? or not action.
Chair Freeman and members of the commission, we have no request to speak on this item.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you so much, Mr. Dillon. Moving on to commissioner announcements. Do we have any commissioner announcements or requests for future agenda items?
I'd like to give just a short recap of the UCLA Land Use Conference, which the chair and our council and I went to. I'll give you a short takeaway. It was pretty much all about housing. It was housing, housing, housing. They asked what the legislature was doing. There's 100 bills. They all involve housing. Interestingly, 2 words weren't mentioned in the entire conference. One was LAFCO, not mentioned, not a peep about LAFCO. The other was agriculture. The legislature seemed to have forgotten about agriculture. I think people were in agreement that it was a pretty good educational experience. It was quite substantive. I took the liberty of super copying the materials that they sent about the housing portion of it, both the PowerPoint and the case summaries. And I would also commend to the commission something that was cited by one of the speakers, Bill Fulton, you may or may not know, used to be the mayor of Ventura, I think. In any event, there's something called the Turner Center Review of Recent Housing Legislation. I give you the link to it, but it's extremely useful. It's got an appendix with a table of just about every housing legislation that was pre-existing and amended in the last 5 years and what they've done. So it's a good research tool. I can either ship it over to Mike, or if anybody wants a copy of it, I got it in a Word document, and you're welcome to it. But yeah, it was all housing. I would also single out for special comment the terrifying Tesla ride that I got traveling with Mr. Freeman. There were screens that were like previously unknown to me in connection with an automotive experience.
Fair enough. One thing that I found really fascinating going to this was the analysis of what was essentially the battle of the mega statutes. And so looking at all the new housing legislation that had gone out, and then how that interacts with existing things like CEQA, and the ways in which people have been using CEQA to battle that. But like, wait, but is CEQA actually like a local thing? No, it's not. All sorts of. And so the juggling of all of that was really interesting. And yeah. I don't know if Mr. Dillon, who is also in attendance with us, has anything to.
I highly recommend the conference. I really enjoyed it. It's really substantive, especially on case law and land use and CEQA, and especially as a practicing lawyer at the time. You have to keep current. This field changes so quickly, and we haven't mentioned Amber Holderness, who's sitting here yet today, but of course you've already appointed her as our new counsel through County Counsel's office, and I give her all the credit for helping to resolve the Santa Rita Hills CSD issues, because we never got anywhere until she showed up. But thank you.
All right. Well, we will.
Yeah. Thanks for Amber for solving that 35-year-old dispute.
Is there any public comment on this item? I'm sorry, this is the commissioner announcements. I got. All right, moving on to executive officer comments.
No comments. Thank you.
Okay, well, in that case, we are now adjourned to Thursday, April 4th, 2024 at 1 p.m. we're back in Santa Maria. Exciting.